You ever seen somebody levitate before? Well, looks can be deceiving.
Ever since the dawn of time, humans have always been fascinated with something that they can't normally defy, a fundamental physical constant that exists within the world that we live in: gravity.
We on the front page of them blogs. Would you be mad at me if the whole world knew this we was on? It would be tragedy. My niggas be globe trotting like travel teams. You always in my travel dreams.
You want me? I want you, baby. My sugar boo. I'm levitating. The Milky Way. Around a minute. Yeah, yeah. Since the beginning of time, people have always been fascinated by levitating, or the ability to lift yourself up from the ground without any sort of physical means. Like in the clip where, Kanye's floating on stage, that obviously has physical supports to it, and so, it makes sense. But I'm talking more about like levitating that you'd see in the movies, or like levitation that you'd see a magician do, where you really can't see the strings and it really looks like they're defying gravity. I already did the bit, I'm not gonna do that again. There isn't just the physical feeling of fighting gravity, but there is the like spiritual or kind of like out of body experiences that people have had. Multiple people have reported before that just by basically sitting there and being in the quiet and kind of like being in their own mind, they've like gained the ability to levitate before. There have been multiple monks who have been high up in the mountains, who basically meditate almost all the time and have attained higher spirituality in essence. They claim that they've been able to levitate off the ground before with no force, nothing that's pushing them up, right? And it's inexplicable. And I think that those are very interesting, but I really want to talk about how you could actually levitate off of the ground without any sort of physical thing holding you up or pushing you up, right? And the way that you could really do this is through magnets. Now, there are like bullet trains, right, that they have in Japan, and I think it's either in Japan, I think it's in Tokyo, or it's in New York. I'll probably fact check it after I finish recording this, but there are places in the world where things are sort of actually levitating, or are basically being lifted off the ground and being able to be pushed very far. And you could imagine that a human being could very easily be levitating off of the ground through that very same exact concept. So like, let's say you really wanted to, like, I don't know, mess with your friends or something, right? And you wanted to just levitate in front of them, but you had no way that you could think of doing it. Well, if you get boots that have metal, right, that is repulsed, that have a magnet in them, that is repulsed by another magnet, right, and you have that magnet point towards a magnet in your shoes, for example, then if the force is strong enough, it could actually lift you up in the air without really any support. It would look like you were legit floating in the air, even though you weren't floating in the air. There's a magnetic piece that's in your shoe that allows you to float. But in reality, you're not being supported by anything. I was just thinking about that hypothetical and how completely absurd that is. I don't know who would ever be using that as actual prank on their friends. Like, I don't know who would ever use that seriously. Now, there's another version of this where instead of having like a magnet in your shoes that allows you to fly, or basically to be lifted up in the air, your brain has like electromagnetism, or it can emit electromagnetic waves, then it could essentially, theoretically, have enough power to push you up off of the ground if you willed it, if it had enough power, then it could actually push you off of the ground simply by defying gravity, or having enough force to kind of like lift your body up from your head. Now, that's, especially people who are into telekinetics, that's usually what they claim. And could that ever realistically happen? Absolutely not, dude. That would never happen. But it is something that's really fun to think about. In order for your brain to be able to lift you up, it would have to encompass so much heat because of the amount of energy that's being exerted in order to basically lift you up or to interact with electromagnetic forces, that your brain would eventually become scrambled or fried. Kind of the same way that a computer does, because it has to put in so much effort to lift you up in the air. Although technically you have to be wearing the shoes in order to levitate, so like if you take them off, you wouldn't be levitating anymore. I think it's a really fun and interesting concept because you really don't have any physical supports. The same way that you'd be wearing shoes walking around, you would be levitating and nobody would know that it's a magnet in your shoes that's making you levitate, aka there's no physical object necessarily that's holding you up or pulling you up. Rather, the force between the magnet and your shoes is actually what's lifting you up, which I think is just incredible and could really be a way that we might do transportation in the future. I mean, if you could imagine if you have a certain, a special set of shoes or something, and so instead of having to wait for an elevator, you can just have a magnet that turns on and basically lifts you up. You know what I mean? And I think that could be technology that could be used in the future and would actually be really cool. So can you levitate in real life? Yes. But not in the way that you think you can levitate in real life. You can't levitate with nothing, but you could levitate without anything physically pulling you up. Rather, the force between two magnets is so strong that it carries your body weight up. Or if your brain could emit a strong enough field, then you could actually be lifted up by the repulsion of that field. But the first one makes a lot more sense than the second, and would really make you look like you're levitating. Even if you took your shoes off, it wouldn't work anymore, which I think is really cool. But yeah, that's it.